Nick Reiner, the son of acclaimed director Rob Reiner, has long lived under the shadow of privilege and expectation. Born into a world where doors opened with the mention of a surname, he grew up surrounded by the glamour of Hollywood, the constant hum of celebrity, and the illusion that proximity to power could shield him from consequence. For most of his life, that illusion sufficed. But the reality of incarceration is harsh, unrelenting, and indifferent to lineage. Behind the steel bars, Nick is no longer a son of fame, no longer a participant in the rhythms of premieres and private parties. He is a number, a schedule, and a body to be counted at dawn. The world outside his cell is irrelevant. Only the immediate, procedural, and unforgiving rhythms of prison matter now. In those first days, Nick confronted the stark absence of control. Hollywood, with its carefully curated scripts and polished interactions, had conditioned him to expect a predictable environment. Every handshake, every conversation, every nod carried social currency. In prison, none of that matters. Respect is earned differently through restraint, attentiveness, and survival. Nick quickly discovered that previous confidence, shaped by privilege, does not translate to protection behind bars. The small missteps, the misunderstandings, the inability to read subtle cues carry consequences far heavier than anything he had previously faced. The psychological toll was immediate. Prison compresses time into repetition, stripping days of variety, nights of peace. Meals counts, lights out. These are the markers of life inside, and they are relentless. The silence between them is loud, filled with reflection, regret, and an acute awareness of personal failure. Nick, accustomed to attention and recognition, found the isolation punishing. Where once his presence commanded notice, now it provoked nothing but indifference. There are no interviews, no red carpets, no whispered admiration. There is only the concrete reality of confinement and the unvarnished reflection of oneself that comes from sitting in a cell with nothing else to do. Adjusting to the physical and social environment was another challenge entirely. Prison life operates on a hierarchy that is strict, unyielding, and often opaque. Nick had to quickly discern whom to trust, whom to avoid, and when to assert himself without attracting unnecessary attention. Misjudgment can have swift and irreversible consequences. Those familiar with his early adjustment describe a man caught between past habits of comfort and the need to adapt to a new, unforgiving ecosystem. His celebrity-adjacent background was both a burden and a source of fascination to other inmates and staff alike. Guards and prisoners alike recognized the name, yet the acknowledgement carried no protection. Instead, it drew scrutiny, curiosity, and sometimes resentment. Fame mutates inside prison. It does not disappear. Nick's family legacy complicated his adaptation. Being the son of Rob Reiner meant that every misstep was scrutinized, every interaction was potentially newsworthy, and every story had the weight of public expectation. Outside, a surname could open doors or smooth over mistakes. Inside, it demanded careful calibration. Oversharing could provoke hostility. Silence could be misinterpreted as arrogance. Survival required him to relearn communication, not in the language of Hollywood, but in the language of the incarcerated, a language where gestures, timing, and observation are more powerful than words. The emotional impact has been profound. Reports from those close to the family indicate that Nick has confronted a series of uncomfortable truths, that privilege cannot shield one from accountability, that comfort is not a skill, and that every decision carries tangible consequences. The illusion of invulnerability dissolves quickly when the routines of prison impose themselves and the protective bubble of reputation bursts. He is now confronted with the raw and immediate consequences of his actions, and the weight of public scrutiny outside the bars only amplifies the internal reckoning. The contrast between Nick's previous life and his current reality is striking. Outside, the world was filled with the thrill of connection, influence, and control. Inside, every day is governed by limitation, repetition, and strict regulation. Where once he may have assumed mistakes could be smoothed over with charm, influence, or legal intervention, now only behavior and adaptability determine safety and stability. The shock of this recalibration has been described as jarring, almost as if he has been thrust into a world with entirely new rules overnight. Prison is unkind to those accustomed to instant gratification. Time stretches, hope becomes procedural, and even small victories are measured in incremental achievements rather than public acclaim. Nick Reiner is learning that legacy cannot dictate survival. Every decision matters, every interaction carries weight, and every lapse risks repercussions. It is a lesson in humility, one that strips away the illusions accumulated over a life shaped by proximity to Hollywood's elite. The tragedy of this experience is not merely legal, it is deeply personal. Nick Reiner is confronting a form of reality that cannot be mediated, softened, or edited. The privileges of his past offer no shelter here. The lesson is stark. Identity, reputation, and influence are irrelevant when survival depends on endurance, patience, and a keen awareness of one's environment. This is the kind of reckoning that is rarely documented, often overlooked in public discourse, yet it is devastatingly complete in its impact. For observers outside, the story may read as scandal or sensational news. For Nick, it is a confrontation with the self, a test of character, and a forced adaptation to a world that does not bend to his expectations. The experience is shaping a new perspective, one that may redefine not only how he views authority, consequence, and family, but also who he will become once he exits confinement. The path forward is uncertain, but the lesson is unequivocal. Fame cannot shield one from reality, and every individual must face the consequences of their choices without exception. While Nick Reiner contends with the unrelenting reality of life behind bars, the ripple effects of his incarceration have extended far beyond the prison walls, enveloping the Reiner family in a tense, uncharted struggle. For decades, Rob Reiner had built a public persona marked by both cinematic achievement and personal integrity. Yet when the media spotlight pivoted from accolades to scandal, the protective veneer of Hollywood influence revealed its limits. Fame, once a shield, now became a magnifying glass, exposing vulnerabilities that had long been private. The Reiners suddenly faced a dual reality, a son navigating the brutal routines of prison, and a family contending with relentless public scrutiny. For Rob Reiner, the impact has been profoundly personal. A father's instinct to shield, to protect, collided with the immutable fact of the law. He could not rewrite the narrative, cannot negotiate leniency by reputation, and cannot insulate Nick from the consequences of his actions. This confrontation with helplessness is unfamiliar, even for someone accustomed to controlling narratives on screen and behind the camera. It is a lesson in humility that cuts deeper than any professional criticism ever could. Each phone call from prison, each legal update, serve as a stark reminder that wealth, fame, and influence have finite reach. Some lessons are learned not on film sets or in boardrooms, but in the quiet, unyielding corridors of justice. The emotional toll on the family has been compounded by public expectation. Hollywood thrives on narratives of redemption, scandal, and familial loyalty, and the Reiners found themselves cast unwillingly in all three roles. Every headline, every rumor amplified the pressure. Friends, colleagues, and fans weighed in, offering sympathy or judgment, often indiscriminately. Social media, in particular, magnified the intensity of the scrutiny, leaving little space for private grief or reflection. For a family accustomed to controlling the cadence of their public persona, the intrusion was disorienting. The balance between protecting Nick's dignity and managing public perception became a daily negotiation, one that required patience, strategy, and emotional stamina. Legal proceedings added another layer of complexity. The courtroom is a theater of accountability, but it operates under rules indifferent to legacy. Each hearing, each motion, Each plea carried the potential to shift both Nick's immediate future and the family's broader standing. Observers might interpret procedural outcomes as detached or technical, but for those living the experience, every decision has profound psychological weight. The knowledge that Nick's trajectory now depends on factors beyond familial control fosters a sense of powerlessness, a humbling reality for a family once accustomed to influence. Yet even amid pressure, moments of introspection emerge. Rob Reiner, reflecting on his own career and choices, confronts questions of parental guidance, personal responsibility, and generational consequence. What could have been done differently? How much is inherited behavior, and how much is individual choice? These are questions without definitive answers, but they shape both internal family discourse and the broader narrative that observers project onto the Reiners. In Hollywood, reflection is often postponed in favor of spectacle. Behind closed doors, it becomes unavoidable. Nick himself experiences a parallel journey, one of identity reconstruction. Inside prison, he is learning to separate the son he was from the individual he must become. The privileges of his past, access, familiarity, social safety nets, no longer dictate outcomes. The lessons are immediate and tangible: cooperation, attentiveness, adaptability, and emotional restraint. Each interaction, whether with fellow inmates or prison staff, offers feedback loops that are unmediated and unforgiving. For someone previously defined by association, this represents a radical recalibration of self-concept. It is a process of deconstruction, stripping away inherited assumptions and rebuilding personal agency from the ground up. The broader implications for the Reiner family also include reputation management in a hypervisible media environment. Public perception, often influenced by selective reporting, can crystallize into enduring narratives that overshadow nuanced realities. For Rob Reiner, managing this perception requires strategic communication, careful boundary setting with the press, and disciplined engagement with social media. Every statement is measured for tone, clarity, and implication, with the understanding that missteps may compound existing pressures. The family must navigate the delicate line between transparency and overexposure, between advocacy for Nick and recognition of the law's authority. Psychologically, the experience cultivates resilience, though it is painful and uneven. Family members confront the fragility of status, the limits of influence, and the necessity of adaptation. They learn that endurance is a skill distinct from fame, one that requires sustained emotional regulation, strategic patience, and a capacity to operate under uncertainty. These lessons, though unwelcome, offer long-term growth, shaping the family's capacity to navigate future crises with clarity and cohesion. Ultimately, the Reiner narrative underscores a broader theme. Legacy is conditional. Its preservation is contingent upon choices, accountability, and adaptation. Fame may create opportunities, but it does not inoculate against consequence. Wealth may offer comfort, but it does not grant immunity. In confronting these realities, both Nick and his family face a crucible in which identity, relationships, and public perception are tested simultaneously. The outcomes will define not just Nick's trajectory, but the contours of a family legacy in the public eye. As Nick continues to navigate the harsh realities of confinement, the Reiners are learning that resilience, reflection, and strategic management are as critical as talent or reputation. What emerges from this period, whether redemption, transformation, or enduring challenge, will shape their personal and professional narratives for years to come. In the end, the story is not solely about incarceration. It is about the intersection of privilege, consequence, and the relentless imperative to adapt when life's script diverges sharply from expectation. As Nick Reiner settles into the routines of incarceration, the initial shock of confinement gradually evolves into a more nuanced confrontation with daily reality. Survival in prison is not defined by notoriety or lineage. It is dictated by the ability to navigate a microcosm governed by strict hierarchies, unwritten rules, and the constant negotiation of boundaries. Nick, whose early life was buffered by fame and familial influence, now confronts an environment where each decision has immediate consequences, and social missteps cannot be corrected with charm or connections. The early weeks emphasized observation. Inmates are acutely aware of the new arrival, particularly one whose last name carries recognition. This attention can be a double-edged sword. Curiosity may invite conversation, but it also draws scrutiny and suspicion. Nick quickly learned to read subtle cues, to differentiate between genuine guidance and veiled challenges. These lessons are not taught. They are absorbed through trial, error, and careful attention. Even minor errors, an incorrectly timed joke, a misjudged reaction, can have repercussions that extend far beyond the moment. In such a setting, Nick discovered that restraint often carries more power than reaction, and that silence, when wielded strategically, can be a protective tool. Adaptation also required mastering routines that were alien to him. Sleep schedules, meal lines, counts, and movement restrictions imposed a rigid structure, one that replaced the free-form rhythm of his previous life. Where Hollywood operates on flexibility, creativity, and the perception of autonomy, prison enforces predictability and compliance. Nick's days became a series of small tests, maintaining composure during interactions with guards, navigating shared spaces with other inmates, and demonstrating the capacity to follow protocol without visible resistance. Each successfully navigated moment reinforced his understanding that adaptation is survival. Relationships inside the prison walls presented another challenge. Social dynamics in confinement are immediate, hierarchical, and sometimes volatile. Nick discovered that alliances were not formed based on past achievements or social standing, but on demonstrated behavior. Trust had to be earned, often incrementally, and every interaction became an assessment of reliability and character. Misjudgment could lead to exclusion, intimidation, or confrontation. For someone raised in a world where influence often precedes familiarity, this represented a profound recalibration. Here, respect is not assumed. It is negotiated continuously through observation, strategic speech, and consistent behavior. The psychological dimension of incarceration proved equally formidable. Beyond the physical routines and social strategies, Nick faced an internal reckoning. Stripped of privilege, he was forced to confront personal patterns, impulses, and limitations. Reflection was unavoidable. Time alone magnifies both regret and self-awareness. Every decision from the past, every moment of negligence, now exists as a reference point against which he measures himself. The relentless clarity of prison life allowed no evasion, no postponement, no illusions of immunity. This confrontation with self became simultaneously painful and transformative, demanding honesty, accountability, and a recalibration of priorities. Education and self-improvement emerged as vital tools for resilience. Nick began to seek opportunities for constructive engagement, whether through reading, workshops, or discussions with mentors and more experienced inmates. Knowledge, he discovered, provided not only distraction but empowerment. Intellectual and emotional growth became a counterbalance to the monotony and tension of confinement. By investing in mental agility and self-discipline, Nick gradually reclaimed a sense of agency, however limited, and learned to redefine success on his own terms, independent of family reputation or societal expectation. The family dimension continued to exert influence, though indirectly. Rob Reiner and other relatives maintained communication, offering guidance and moral support while carefully balancing visibility and discretion. These interactions underscored the reality that connection remains vital, but influence is constrained. The Reiners could offer counsel, encouragement, and occasional advocacy, yet the ultimate outcome rested on Nick's actions and decisions within a system that does not differentiate based on pedigree. The lesson, both for Nick and for his family, was stark. Influence cannot substitute for personal responsibility, and enduring respect must be earned anew within every context. Nick's evolving perspective also included a growing recognition of resilience as an active practice. Survival is not passive. It requires foresight, judgment, and consistent effort. The ability to anticipate challenges, to modulate emotional responses, and to establish personal boundaries became key strategies. Each day of adherence to these principles reinforced a new sense of competence, a slowly emerging identity defined by endurance rather than inheritance. In essence, Nick began to reconstruct himself, piece by piece, using the crucible of confinement as a catalyst for growth rather than only a site of punishment. Looking forward, the path remains uncertain. Release, reintegration, and public perception all pose formidable challenges. Yet Nick's experience offers a profound insight. The transformative potential of accountability is real, though often uncomfortable. By navigating the harsh realities of prison life with attention, restraint, and introspection, he demonstrates that even amidst adversity, personal agency and growth are possible. This journey underscores a broader truth that extends beyond the Reiner family. Consequence can catalyze evolution, and survival is as much a mental and emotional endeavor as a physical one. Ultimately, Part 3 of Nick Reiner's story emphasizes that the journey within the prison walls is both concrete and metaphorical. It is a landscape of control, consequence, and reflection, where the absence of privilege demands new forms of skill, awareness, and self-determination. Nick's path is one of incremental transformation, a testament to the human capacity to adapt under pressure, and a reminder that identity, resilience, and survival are continually forged through experience, not inheritance. As Nick Reiner's time behind bars continues, the focus shifts from survival to the possibilities of redemption and rebuilding a life once defined by privilege, now constrained by consequence. The prison experience, while punishing, has become an unexpected catalyst for self-reflection. Stripped of status, comfort, and influence, Nick is confronted with the fundamental question: who is he beyond the Reiner name? This inquiry drives the slow reconstruction of identity, a process that involves acknowledging past mistakes, confronting personal weaknesses, and cultivating resilience that is independent of family reputation. One of the first steps in this journey has been education and skill development. While incarceration limits freedom, it does not eliminate opportunity for growth. Nick has reportedly engaged in programs aimed at personal development, from literacy and vocational workshops to mental health and mediation classes. Each hour spent in structured activity reinforces a sense of agency and accountability. For someone whose early life was buffered by access, learning to derive purpose and accomplishment from personal effort rather than inherited influence is a radical recalibration. It is a form of empowerment that carries long-term implications, the ability to navigate the world outside prison with confidence grounded in skill rather than surname. Family dynamics play a critical role in this phase of transformation. Rob Reiner and other family members have maintained a delicate balance, supportive but restrained, guiding but non-intrusive. Contact with the family provides emotional sustenance, a reminder that Nick is not entirely isolated from the world that shaped his early identity. Yet these interactions also reinforce accountability. The Reiners cannot shield him from the realities of the legal system or undo the consequences of his actions. Instead, they serve as anchors, offering perspective, encouragement, and an emotional bridge to the life he once knew and must learn to rebuild. The juxtaposition of privilege and consequence underscores a powerful lesson. Relationships endure when grounded in responsibility, honesty, and mutual respect. Social rehabilitation within the prison ecosystem continues to shape Nick's development. Navigating interpersonal dynamics requires careful judgment, negotiation, and patience. He must understand hierarchy, establish credibility, and cultivate a reputation that is earned rather than assumed. These lessons, initially about survival, extend naturally to life beyond incarceration. By learning to engage thoughtfully with diverse personalities under pressure, Nick developed skills in conflict resolution, empathy, and strategic communication. These tools are as valuable outside prison as they are within, forming a foundation for reintegration into society and professional environments that demand adaptability and emotional intelligence. Psychological resilience is central to Nick's transformation. Incarceration is inherently isolating, but it also offers uninterrupted time for reflection. Nick has had to confront uncomfortable truths, the fragility of privilege, the permanence of consequences, and the necessity of personal accountability. Coping with these realities requires emotional regulation, sustained focus, and the development of coping strategies that rely on internal resources rather than external validation. Through this process, he gains insight into the nature of responsibility, the impact of actions on oneself and others, and the importance of foresight and self-discipline. Preparation for life beyond the walls also includes strategic planning for reintegration. Legal constraints, public perception, and personal goals must all be considered. Nick's path forward is uncertain, yet the lessons learned during confinement provide a framework. The cultivation of discipline, emotional intelligence, and practical skills equips him to approach freedom not as a return to past habits, but as an opportunity for reconstruction. In this sense, prison functions not only as punishment, but as a structured environment in which transformation is possible, provided the lessons are internalized and applied. The broader narrative of the Reiner family remains intertwined with Nick's journey. Public attention persists, yet the family has demonstrated resilience and careful navigation. Media scrutiny continues to challenge privacy, yet it also highlights the distinction between scandal and growth. By managing visibility thoughtfully, the Reiners reinforce the message that accountability, humility, and reflection are integral to reputation management. The family's approach underscores a broader principle. Legacy is not solely about achievements or fame, but about the capacity to withstand adversity, maintain integrity, and support the responsible growth of each member. Looking ahead, the potential for redemption depends on a combination of personal effort, practical skill, and the ability to navigate social and professional reintegration. Nick Reiner's journey illustrates that consequence, while punitive, can catalyze profound personal transformation. The challenge lies not only in rebuilding external circumstances, but in reconstructing self-perception, identity, and purpose. Success in this context is measured less by public approval than by the ability to sustain accountability, exercise judgment, and cultivate meaningful connections within and beyond the family unit. Ultimately, Part 4 of Nick Reiner's story highlights the intersection of consequence, growth, and legacy. Incarceration strips away the superficial markers of identity, fame, influence, and comfort, leaving only the raw essentials of character and resilience. The journey toward redemption is neither linear nor guaranteed, yet it is illuminated by intentional effort, reflection, and a commitment to personal transformation. For Nick, the experience is both humbling and instructive, providing a rare opportunity to redefine himself on terms independent of inheritance. For the Reiner family, it is a testament to the enduring power of support, guidance, and disciplined engagement in shaping the trajectory of a loved one navigating one of life's harshest realities. The next phase, post-release, will test everything learned: the ability to maintain composure under public scrutiny, the capacity to leverage skills and lessons acquired in confinement, and the resolve to pursue a life defined not by past privilege, but by accountability and self-determination. Nick Reiner's story, still unfolding, serves as a cautionary tale, a narrative of resilience, and a reminder that even in the most controlled and visible environments, personal choice, responsibility, and transformation remains central to legacy. As Nick Reiner's sentence approaches its conclusion, the focus shifts to life beyond the walls, an environment that, while familiar in appearance, demands adaptation on a level far deeper than physical freedom. The world outside no longer measures him solely by the Reiner name, yet the shadows of family legacy and public scrutiny remain. For Nick, reintegration is not simply about returning to society. It is a profound exercise in reestablishing identity, accountability, and purpose in a context that no longer grants privilege as a default. Reentry into the public sphere carries inherent tension. The media, having chronicled his legal troubles and incarceration, maintains a vigilant gaze. Every public appearance, statement, or social media interaction carries amplified significance. Nick must navigate these dynamics carefully, balancing transparency with privacy, accountability with discretion. One misstep could resurrect narratives of failure that have been slowly reframed through personal growth. In this sense, freedom is not merely a physical state. It is a continuous negotiation between self-perception, public perception, and authentic responsibility. Practical reintegration requires concrete planning. Employment, education, and social relationships are all recalibrated in light of recent experiences. Nick's prior life offered comfort and access. Now he must rely on effort, skill, and adaptability. Vocational training undertaken during incarceration becomes essential, providing not only technical skill, but also a sense of self-reliance. Emotional intelligence, honed under the pressures of confinement, offers a strategic advantage in navigating professional and interpersonal landscapes that were previously mediated by reputation alone. Rebuilding a credible and sustainable trajectory requires the integration of these lessons into every aspect of daily life. Family support continues to play a critical role. Rob Reiner and extended family act as both stabilizers and moral guides, offering counsel while emphasizing that responsibility ultimately rests with Nick. The dynamic is delicate. Too much intervention risks undermining autonomy, while too little may leave him exposed to external pressures. Communication, consistency, and honesty become pillars of the post-incarceration transition. In this framework, family involvement serves less as a shield and more as a scaffold, providing guidance while leaving room for individual growth and accountability. Psychological and emotional challenges remain profound. Freedom after incarceration often brings disorientation, as habitual routines and social hierarchies abruptly shift. Nick faces the task of translating skills developed within the rigid, high-stakes environment of prison into contexts governed by subtle social cues, professional expectations, and relational nuance. He must also contend with lingering stigma, the residual impressions of past mistakes that society, colleagues, or casual acquaintances may carry. Coping with these challenges requires resilience, perspective, and deliberate effort to demonstrate change through consistent action rather than rhetoric. Reputation management is another key consideration. For the Reiner family, the interplay between media narratives and public memory has long been a concern. Post-incarceration, the stakes are higher. Nick must carefully curate his public persona, acknowledging past missteps without allowing them to define his entire identity. Strategic communication, selective engagement, and authentic demonstration of growth become central tools. This is not about contrived image rehabilitation, but about rebuilding trust, credibility, and integrity, both within his family and in broader social and professional contexts. Relationships outside the immediate family require recalibration. Friends, colleagues, and industry connections may harbor uncertainty, skepticism, or outright judgment. Nick's approach must balance patience with initiative, demonstrating reliability, consistency, and self-awareness. The ability to navigate complex social landscapes, a skill honed in the pressures of prison, now serves as a critical component of successful reintegration. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to reinforce accountability, rebuild trust, and reestablish meaningful social connections. Looking further ahead, Nick's trajectory underscores a broader theme: the long-term impact of accountability and personal responsibility. Redemption, in this context, is not a single event, but a continuous process, one that involves aligning actions with principles, demonstrating sustained growth, and integrating lessons learned under duress into everyday life. The potential for transformation is significant, but it depends entirely on conscious effort, resilience, and the consistent application of the insights gained during incarceration. The Reiner family's role in this phase is simultaneously supportive and instructive. They model the balance between accountability and compassion, emphasizing that legacy is not solely inherited, but actively cultivated through conduct, integrity, and resilience. For Nick, internalizing these lessons is essential, not as abstract ideals, but as practical guides for navigating a world that no longer defers to name recognition alone. Ultimately, Part 5 illustrates that the journey after incarceration is as critical as the experience within prison. Nick Reiner's story is not solely about consequence. It is about the capacity for transformation, the deliberate reconstruction of identity, and the negotiation of legacy in real time. Life beyond the bars demands vigilance, adaptability, and intentionality. Success is measured not by public applause or familial reprieve, but by the ability to sustain accountability, cultivate meaningful relationships, and demonstrate through consistent action that past mistakes do not define future potential. In this sense, freedom is both a gift and a responsibility, a platform upon which personal growth, reintegration, and enduring redemption must be actively constructed. As Nick Reiner transitions fully into life beyond incarceration, the long-term consequences of his actions begin to crystallize, shaping his career prospects, public reputation, and social relationships in ways that will persist for years. For someone born into the Hollywood sphere, where recognition and access often define opportunity, the fall from favor has been abrupt and instructive. What was once an assumed trajectory of influence and opportunity must now be reconstructed deliberately, grounded in demonstrated reliability and personal accountability rather than familial association. The first arena impacted is professional opportunity. In Hollywood, reputation is a currency as tangible as any financial asset. Nick's prior social capital offered him potential doors, but the legal record and public awareness of his incarceration create a new landscape. Employers, collaborators, and investors weigh both risk and perception. Even with skill or ambition, the residual stigma may limit immediate access to high-profile roles or ventures. Strategic planning, patience, and the cultivation of smaller, credible projects become essential. Nick must demonstrate that his experiences have fostered maturity, resilience, and ethical judgment, qualities now as important as talent or network. Public perception adds another layer of complexity. The media has chronicled both his missteps and family reactions, and the narrative, once sensationalized, becomes embedded in collective memory. Every social media presence, interview, or public appearance carries the potential to reinforce or reshape this perception. Nick faces the delicate task of acknowledging past failures while projecting authenticity and growth. Overemphasis on image management can appear contrived, while inattention risks allowing negative narratives to dominate. Rebuilding reputation is thus a strategic, ongoing process, requiring deliberate transparency, measured engagement, and a consistent demonstration of personal development. Social reintegration extends beyond career and media perception to the fundamental dynamics of trust, relationships, and community. Friends and acquaintances may approach interactions with skepticism or judgment, and prior connections may have shifted during his absence. Nick must navigate these dynamics carefully, demonstrating reliability, consistency, and accountability. Reestablishing meaningful relationships is less about reinstating old patterns and more about creating new frameworks of interaction that reflect both past lessons and present integrity. These relational skills, honed under the pressures of confinement, now provide a foundation for rebuilding social capital in a credible, sustainable manner. Family dynamics remain central to Nick's long-term recovery and integration. Rob Reiner and other relatives provide guidance, emotional support, and perspective, but also emphasize accountability and personal responsibility. The balance between support and autonomy is delicate. Excessive intervention risks dependency, while insufficient engagement risks isolation. The family's role is to model resilience, integrity, and strategic engagement, serving as both anchor and guide as Nick negotiates the broader world. This dynamic reinforces the lesson that legacy is not simply inherited. It is actively maintained through conduct, decisions, and personal growth. Psychological resilience continues to be tested. While the immediate pressures of incarceration have passed, the adjustment to freedom requires ongoing emotional regulation, stress management, and self-awareness. External pressures, public scrutiny, professional uncertainty, and social reintegration intersect with internal processes of identity reconstruction, creating a landscape where lapses or misjudgments carry meaningful consequences. Nick must integrate the self-discipline, observation skills, and emotional intelligence developed during confinement into a life that is less regimented, more fluid, and highly visible. This represents one of the most challenging transitions, as it demands adaptation without the structured support of a controlled environment. The consequences also extend to personal identity and sense of purpose. Nick has been forced to confront questions that previously were abstract or deferred. What defines him beyond family reputation? How will he contribute meaningfully to his chosen field and community? How will he maintain integrity while navigating a world sensitive to perception and history? These inquiries are foundational to long-term success, shaping the framework within which professional, social, and familial interactions occur. They compel reflection, intentionality, and proactive decision-making, skills essential for sustaining growth and mitigating relapse into past patterns. Reputation management, career rebuilding, and social reintegration converge into a single strategic imperative: credibility. In the post-incarceration landscape, credibility is not assumed. It is earned through repeated demonstration of accountability, competence, and maturity. For Nick, every decision, from public statements to professional commitments to personal relationships, becomes an opportunity to reinforce credibility and gradually reshape perception. Unlike fame, which can be instantaneous and superficial, credibility develops incrementally through consistent, verifiable action. This distinction is critical as it determines the trajectory of Nick's life beyond confinement. Ultimately, Part 6 underscores the enduring impact of consequence and the complexity of post-incarceration life for someone born into privilege. Nick Reiner's experience illustrates that even a name synonymous with Hollywood influence cannot fully mitigate the consequences of personal choices. Redemption, reintegration, and reputation rebuilding require sustained effort, strategic planning, and the integration of lessons learned under duress. The path forward is neither guaranteed nor linear, but it offers the possibility of transformation grounded in resilience, accountability, and deliberate action. The journey is ongoing, yet it reveals an essential truth. Long-term success and personal restoration are defined not by inheritance or early advantage, but by consistent effort, thoughtful adaptation, and the deliberate cultivation of integrity in every sphere of life. For Nick Reiner, the challenge now is to translate the lessons of confinement into lasting personal and professional growth, to rebuild credibility, and to establish an identity that is both authentic and resilient. This stage of his story will determine whether the past defines him or whether he leverages it as a foundation for a transformed, accountable, and enduring future. As Nick Reiner navigates life beyond incarceration, the psychological reverberations of his imprisonment continue to shape his worldview, interactions, and decisions. Confinement leaves an indelible mark, not merely as a memory of restriction, but as a lens through which reality is now perceived. Trust becomes measured, social interaction scrutinized, and self-awareness heightened. He has come to understand that the world is simultaneously more vulnerable and more unforgiving than he ever realized, and that the skills of adaptation learned behind bars are essential for survival in any high-stakes environment. One of the most profound challenges is the management of anxiety and the persistent sense of scrutiny. Being the son of Rob Reiner ensures that public and industry attention remains unavoidable. While freedom removes the physical barriers of incarceration, the psychological barriers remain. Nick must now constantly negotiate the weight of public perception. Friends, colleagues, fans, and media all interpret, judge, and remember his past. The mental toll of constantly evaluating every action, every word, and every appearance is significant. In this sense, reintegration is not simply logistical. It is a continuous exercise in emotional and cognitive resilience. Hollywood, with its unique ecosystem, presents another layer of complexity. The industry thrives on narrative, reputation, and perception. Nick's past legal troubles, amplified by media coverage, create a complex environment in which his actions are evaluated not only on merit, but also against a backdrop of notoriety. Opportunities, collaborations, and invitations to participate in projects are influenced by both talent and the perceived reliability of character. In some cases, doors may remain open due to family legacy. In others, skepticism and caution may prevail. The challenge lies in navigating these dualities, leveraging connections when appropriate, while proving personal accountability and reliability through consistent performance and ethical conduct. Social reintegration extends beyond professional networks to personal relationships. Friends and acquaintances often reassess dynamics following incarceration. Trust may be fragile, and assumptions about behavior and character may linger. Nick's approach requires patience, consistent demonstration of responsibility, and authentic engagement. These are skills cultivated during confinement, where interpersonal interactions demanded careful observation, measured response, and the establishment of credibility over time. Now, the same principles apply in a less regimented, more nuanced social landscape, where consequences are less immediate but potentially more enduring. Psychologically, Nick is confronted with a duality: the need to reconcile public scrutiny with private self-conception. He must integrate the lessons of confinement, self-discipline, reflection, resilience, into a life that is less predictable, more autonomous, and subject to the perception of others. The ongoing challenge is balancing transparency with discretion, vulnerability with fortitude, and accountability with authenticity. In essence, his post-incarceration life becomes a laboratory for testing emotional intelligence, moral reasoning, and adaptive strategy under conditions that are simultaneously familiar and unforgiving. Family influence continues to be pivotal. Rob Reiner and the extended family provide both moral grounding and strategic counsel, serving as anchors in a world reshaped by consequence. Their support underscores a critical point. While privilege cannot erase past mistakes, the presence of a stable, guiding family framework can provide both security and accountability. The family's approach models resilience, empathy, and strategic intervention, showing that legacy is maintained not only through achievement, but also through ethical guidance and emotional support. Media and public attention, however, impose limits. Every misstep risks rekindling past narratives, and the desire for personal rehabilitation must be balanced against unavoidable scrutiny. Nick's challenge is to navigate this environment with clarity and discipline, leveraging opportunities to demonstrate growth without becoming enmeshed in sensationalism. The lesson is that personal redemption is not solely an internal process. It must be evidenced publicly, thoughtfully, and consistently over time to reshape perception and restore credibility. Long-term implications for social and professional life are profound. Nick's experience illustrates the fragility of reputation, the necessity of accountability, and the resilience required to navigate high-pressure environments. Personal and professional relationships are recalibrated, with trust rebuilt gradually through actions rather than assertion. Skills acquired in confinement, observation, emotional regulation, strategic engagement become crucial assets in the broader context of life beyond prison. Ultimately, Part 7 emphasizes that consequences are enduring, psychological adaptation is continuous, and legacy must be actively curated. Nick Reiner's journey is emblematic of the intersection between privilege and accountability, public scrutiny and private transformation. The Hollywood backdrop amplifies stakes, but the underlying principles, resilience, personal responsibility, ethical conduct, and emotional intelligence, apply universally. Redemption, credibility, and social reintegration are not instantaneous, but are earned through sustained effort, thoughtful action, and consistent demonstration of growth. The narrative of Nick Reiner, now approaching the next chapter of life, serves as both cautionary tale and blueprint for transformation. The journey from incarceration to reintegration highlights the intricate interplay of consequence, identity, and legacy, showing that personal evolution is possible when structured reflection, accountability, and deliberate action guide behavior. How he navigates the aftermath will define not only his personal trajectory, but also the enduring perception of the Reiner family legacy in the public consciousness. In the final analysis, the story is about resilience, the ability to confront the past, rebuild the present, and shape the future through conscious choice, discipline, and integrity.